I knew someone that knew Camus, and he was asked, do you believe in the Gospels? Do you believe in Jesus Christ? To which Camus responded, they're too beautiful to believe. That's an incredible answer, and there's a strange contradiction in that. So why isn't beauty evidence of something? Which he never answered in any of his works. But what is the good life? Is it something beautiful? Is it something true? Is it something good? That still is taken from a 1970s sitcom, very famous sitcom at the time called The Good Life. The idea was the principal character is called Mr. Good, and he reaches a midlife crisis. All he does is go to work, good morning darling, good evening darling, eat, work, and he realises he wants much more than that, because he's going to die. We're all going to die. So he talks his good lady wife, played by the amazing Felicity Kendall, the heartthrob of the entire nation at that particular time, to going self-sufficient in their suburban house. They've got posh neighbours next to them who don't know what they're doing, next to these two crazies going self-sufficient, ploughing up their garden, planting vegetables, cabbages, I seem to remember, trying to find out what is the good life. If we're going to die, what will have made us happy? What will have made us loving? What will have made us truthful to each other? So there were very deep questions behind something that actually seemed quite trivial. Lots of people explore notions of the good life, including one of my heroes, Jacques Fresco. He started something called the Venus Project. How do we live closer to nature and find meaning in that way? Sustainable lifestyles, sustainable architecture. You notice his architectural model there. I mean, he actually designed cities, but he designed them to give meaning and value to human life. A water source was always in the centre, buildings around the centre, so you had a feeling of animal security. There were food stocks, there were stores, water, neighbours. So you ended up with this feeling of security which most modern cities will never have. And you started from there. My trouble with his vision isn't that it wasn't beautiful, but it's too limited. If you give everybody exactly what they want, they're still going to wake up and say, is that enough? Right, I'm adjusted to my neighbours, I've got a sustaining lifestyle, I've got enough to eat, enough to drink, but I'm still going to die, and maybe it's not enough. That is another visionary city that is called Arcosanti, by the American-Italian architect Paolo Soleri. He wanted to take it further than Jacques Fresco and say, look, architectural models are great, theories are great, let's try it out, let's see if it works. This is an incredible cityscape that's still under construction. Most of the people working on that ever-developing project say it is very enriching. So we're taking steps in the right direction. This is something from a third example. There is a place called the Findhorn community in Scotland, Morrisshire. I went there in 1978, which ages me, when the magic was still operative. They're different from the other two. They're different from the other visionaries. They've got sort of a spiritual ideal behind it as well. What's religion? Maybe it's at least something to do with finding a connection with the living environment. A connection with the forces of life and renewal. A connection with expanding yourself to remember your children, your grandchildren, and all the people that went before you. Without an infinite number of people before us, none of us would be here. Do we know their names? Do we know their lives? Do we care about them? Why not? Without them, we wouldn't be here this afternoon. Something strange happened in that community, which is why I went there as a very young cub. A couple of mystics founded it, very unusual mystics. One was called Peter Caddy, who actually had been in the Royal Air Force. He got demobbed and suddenly found himself reading all these mystical texts and thought, oh, I can apply those things. That's not just theory, I can make those things work. His wife, Eileen Caddy, who ended up winning the CBE, I think, started feeling natural forces were trying to talk to her. That's not a simple idea, that's a very complex idea. I'm not even sure what she means by that. But she felt nature, living nature, growing, evolving, alive, sentient nature was trying to talk to her to say you're going in the right direction. Those are not average sizes for vegetables, you may have noticed that. Something odd started happening. They were very poor. There was Eileen and Peter and Dorothy McLean, just 3 people. They lived in a caravan after the Second Great War. Nature started going berserk as these feelings started coming through Eileen. They had an allotment, the British call them allotments, don't they? In other words, a vegetable garden, to try and supplement their very meagre income. It was nearly all sand. No, that's right, so they were hoping that something would happen. Gigantic cabbages, gigantic melons, everything went out of control. The BBC got involved. The Soil Association got involved. But the proof is in the photographs. By the way, I went to see their botanical gardens. I went to see where they were planting little things. You scrape away the topsoil and it is sand directly underneath. There's no explanation for that. My first friend when I moved to London was one of the regular visitors to the Findhorn Foundation. That is Sir George Trevelyan. He was a mystic in his own right, a gentleman, a scholar, a dynamo behind the rising ecological movement at that time. He found nothing unusual in any of that. I remember going with him at one point to Glastonbury. Remember, they have those wonderful rock festivals every year. In the past, it was much more intimately involved with spirituality. They dropped the ball rather with that. I mean, now it's just sort of a big club atmosphere, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, you know, don't forget the important bits. They're interesting too. So that was an extraordinary man who felt nothing unusual in a living nature trying to tell us from the inside and around us what it wanted. His big inspiration, his big thought, big thinking, that's going around these days, is we keep telling nature what it's got to do. We want a high-rise building there, we want to change the course of a river there. Oh, that's not working, let's build a hydroponic garden. He said, it won't work in the long term. Let's ask nature what it wants. That's a revolutionary thought. He said if we don't start asking nature what it wants, instead of utopian cities of the future, where everybody's leading a balanced life and everybody finds sustainable resources, instead of the Venus Project, instead of Arcasanti, you get a dystopia. If we don't start listening to what the natural order wants to say to us as a collective, as an individual, this will be the future. This will be the future we live, not our great-great-great-grandchildren. Listen to what people are saying at the moment, some of the more thoughtful people in Extinction Rebellion. This isn't too far away. This will be, according to them at least, in the lifetimes of our children. That is terrifying. Already we're beginning to find uncontrollable viruses, unclean air, poisoned food. We're beginning to find it a part of human life. No, it's not. No, it's not. The fact we're beginning to think, oh, that's just what we all have to deal with, shows there's something deeply wrong. And that is not what nature is trying to say to us. It's trying to say, pull back and find a new sense of orientation if you really love your family and what comes next. In my case, and some other people's, it led to the Quakers. I'm what you call a Quaker. That is loosely loosely interpreted as a Quaker pagan or a Quaker inspired pagan. In other words, a Quaker, a quietist that wants to listen to nature, that wants to listen to spirit. This guy did it hundreds of years ago. He was a Quaker artist called Edward Hicks, and he wanted to listen to nature. What is it telling us? Now, obviously, these are beautiful paintings, so he's not saying this has got to be taken realistically, but symbolically. This is called the Peaceable Kingdom. Nowadays, it's housed in the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. They're actually quotes from the prophet Isaiah in the Old Testament. You notice all the animals that normally compete for survival are living together. The world has found rebalancing. That's really what he was trying to get at. He would say, if he was in this room now, he'd say, no, I'm not talking about the lion sitting down with the lamb literally. I'm talking about an earth, a sphere of life that has found balance again. And therefore everything, every single species is thriving. Now they used to call that paradise. I couldn't resist putting in more than one of his paintings because they're absolutely beautiful. The people at the side are Quakers. You see the group of people over there. Notice the colours of the people. They sort of almost melt into the landscape. They're the same colours because they're trying to become a part of the natural order. They're not stood back saying, we've nothing to do with this, it's not to do with us, we're going to wear some new masks, we're going to do what the World Health Organization tells us, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. What they're saying is, but it's not the cure. The cure is in our life choices and how we interact with the environment. Some people think religion is an abstract and sophisticated relationship with the environment. That's something I think is a very important definition. Which is why this is not only a beautiful painting, it's really alluding to a group of people who are trying to do that. There's nothing new in that, but there are too few. Again, look at the way he uses colour, he uses form. It's obviously symbolic. A child isn't that big and a child doesn't cuddle a lion, at least not literally. But we can all cuddle the wildlife and support the wildlife of Africa and support the systems that sustain it and ultimately us. That's what he's getting at. If we don't do that, we're getting closer and closer to a dystopian hell instead of discovering Eden reborn, paradise regained. This is someone looking for answers. You notice he's looking away from the group of Quakers in that corner. Therefore, he doesn't know where to get the answers. He's looking, but he's not going to get them. This is someone who's on the verge of getting them. He's holding, he's embracing nature, and he's looking at nature. The stream that's acting like a tutor, the rocks that are telling lessons about life and how to live it. That is one of his less symbolic paintings. That's actually an area where he lived for a while. That's the residence of David Twining. Again, well, I wanted to show that because of all the lovely colours blending together. He felt what they managed to do, the Twining family, was live as close to nature that you could possibly get in that time and that place. And they were happy. But they were looking for more at the same time, but not throwing answers at each other. He thought that was an incredible experience. There is absolutely no reason for this picture. I just like pictures of Noah's Ark. That picture is vital, however. Nowadays, we're hearing wars about Christopher Columbus. Was he a swine or not? I don't know. I'm only 63, not 163. I do know that it's unfair to say he's the only person to discover America. That is a treaty, a group of Quakers under the guidance of William Penn, a man that said peace is what makes us alive. They're actually signing one of the original treaties with the Native Americans, which they honoured. Quakers forbade each other to have slaves. They couldn't understand why women weren't completely active and free in their own communities. None of that made any sense to them. People ahead of time, because they're listening to nature. What he's trying to say there is there's a future coming where husbandry will be dominant. In other words, Human society is growing, the human population is growing. Very soon it might be out of control. Notice the date on that. That's very early to be saying those sorts of things. Anything in the 19th century, particularly 1848, is very early. But he's saying all this is on the way. There's no stopping it. But don't try and stop it. That's the wrong solution. What is nature telling you? That's the solution. You notice the children, not adults, are rushing up to the herds. They're trying to contextualize things. How do Quakers feel in those communities, and nowadays they can actually achieve those things? Spice. Simplicity, peace, integrity, community is one of the biggest values. If you help your neighbours, then maybe it's reflecting something about you as well. Equality. Values that aren't too well known in the modern world, sadly. This is another experiment based on Quaker principles, where they're trying to live those lives but make things sustainable, while bowing to the pressures of modern city life, urban life, social life, but at the same time trying to induce that type of balance. These are Quakers, you notice the Q shape there. Is it true that nobody's trying to do a thing about the world and its disorders? No, you're looking at a group of people that are trying to do something about it, as we said here. Because what is at stake? I rather like dystopian movies, dystopian fiction. I rather like Mad Max. I think it makes a great movie. But do we really want to live like that? Do we really, really, really want to live like that? Where you can't go out, you can't do anything, and nothing is safe. And everything's a pitched battle for as long as you live. And by the way, you won't live that long because you're getting older and a bigger and stronger and younger guy is coming along and going to kill you. Do you really want to live that way? Really, really? Don't you want children? Don't you want grandchildren? Why not? That, for me, as a gay man, is a beautiful vision of the future. You've got the older generations. You've got the main generations, you've got the next generation, sharing a table, enjoying each other's company, and the whole staff of life is continuous. That, for me, would be one of the great lessons of listening to living nature. Am I saying that family life is perfect? We all know it's not. But I am saying, what else is there if we really want to be balanced? We all have family issues, but really we've got to be careful of throwing out the baby with the bathwater, because we do end up with Mad Max and we don't end up with anything happy. That's it, thank you. And just a quick vision of what maybe sustainability and the good life might mean. Not telling you how to live, that's not my choice, that's not my job, but I am saying there are really some beautiful visions out there that maybe are worth thinking about and sometimes worth embracing. Thank you.